Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the Town Council regular meeting, Wednesday, December 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Green Room. Can we also say the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so before we get to visitors, we need to make one adjustment to the agenda. I'll look for a motion to add to item number 4, the appointment of the Blight Hearing Committee. I have a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 2, which is visitors. Are there any visitors that would like to be recognized at this time? Can you just step on over here in front of the mic, please?
Darby Hiddle, 14 Leffingwell Road.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm here in front of the town council tonight to talk about replacing the sidewalk on Leffingwell. A lot of great work was done downtown this past year with repaving of roads, some not so great work. What we believe has happened is the sidewalk on Leffingwell was replaced with a substandard sidewalk that consists of what I like to refer as ascrete. It's got an asphalt curb and a concrete sidewalk. I think there's actually better words I could use to describe it, which I probably have. So we were upset about it when it first happened, but now we're starting to realize it's actually a tripping hazard. I've done a lot of construction work over the years, last 25 years, working in towns all along the coast, and I've never seen a sidewalk quite like this. So I was concerned, and I contacted the town manager earlier this year. Carl came out to my house. Carl's here tonight. He can probably attest to the fact that he did come out with the Public Works Director. I believe his name's Todd. And they came out for a visit, and we talked about the problem. And I knew that all the work was subcontracted for the paving, so I couldn't understand why someone would approve a design from a subcontractor that would consist of an asphalt curb at an angle and a concrete sidewalk. Initially, there was not really an answer to that, but the more I pressed the gentleman, I learned that the town actually built the sidewalk. I had to ask numerous times, and finally Todd said to me, well, I actually built the sidewalk. And I've been building sidewalks for a long time. And I said, well, there's no other sidewalks like this in town, so why did you build it this way? Come to find out, there was no review process. There was nobody in town who reviewed the design of the sidewalk. Now, I've been on Leffingwell for more than 20 years, and we always had a concrete sidewalk with a regular concrete curb that was straight up and down at a 90-degree angle, and no tripping hazard, no high spots, no low spots. And at each driveway, the sidewalk would dip down and cross in front of everyone's driveway. It was beautiful. Leffingwell is a beautiful street in town, and it's, I think, even being nominated to become on the National Historic Register, or there's a push to put it on the historic district or something. And it just, in my opinion, and I'm not speaking for my wife, but we've been talking about it all year. In her opinion, the new sidewalk looks like hell, for lack of a better term. And now the sidewalk stops at each driveway, and asphalt paving bridges the gap between the sidewalk and the next part of the sidewalk in everyone's driveway. And we have a shell driveway with seashells, and then it's got a granite stone buffer. So basically, we think that it was a mistake. When I pressed Carl and Todd about it, they ultimately took a very long time, but finally admitted that it was done to save money. That was the answer that I received from the town. And I did not ask for granite curbing like you see in Post Office Square and like you see in front of the town hall over here. If you go down by the post office, from the moment you come into the main part of town and then come down in front of Dave's Scottish pub there, the sidewalk is all buffered by granite curbing along the side. That was never on Leffingwell, and we're not asking for granite curbing. But when I brought up the fact that the asphalt was substandard, it was actually damaged within a week of being installed. If you look online, you find out that asphalt curbing is a much cheaper option than a concrete curb on a sidewalk, and it also lasts about half as long. It's very less durable. People were driving over the curb, damaging it within a week. The asphalt curb in front of our house has damage on multiple locations. However, the town wanted to save money. But in all the paving that was done down Commerce and up Grove and on Leffingwell was, from what I can tell, one of the only sidewalks that needed to be installed. But the town apparently didn't bid that part of the job out. There was no, I didn't know it, but the town actually has a design review board committee, which I think reviews plans that are done by contractors around town to make sure, and if you can read the town website, that the work maintains the historic nature of our town, and it looks nice, and we're not doing things around town that detract from the way things look. So one gap I identified is, I don't think that the work that the town is doing, Todd and his crew, is being reviewed by the design board. And, you know, we got bigger problems in this town than replacing a sidewalk. I get that. But every day when I pull out, I'm reminded that it was done incorrectly because the right tire on my truck catches on the sidewalk and jumps up off the ground. And that's because when the asphalt curb wasn't modified, it's the same height all the way down Leffingwell. And when you get to those dips that go in the driveway, the curb sticks up at an angle. It starts off gradually, but there's a tripping hazard. And I believe, I've checked, I believe it's an ADA violation. And that curb never should have been installed, because I think the ADA violation is like you can't have a greater tripping hazard than like 1/8 of an inch. Well, at every driveway, and you know, we have a significant number, we have a good number, I won't say significant, we have a good number of what I believe special needs residents who live in our neighborhood and who walk up and down Leffingwell all the time. I see them every morning, they're so kind, and we say hi, and they're walking on Leffingwell all the time. So we've got these brand new tripping hazards that never existed. It looks like hell. I want it gone. You know, I realize there are other residents who are fine with it, and they're just thankful that the sidewalk was finally replaced. But it wasn't replaced with a sidewalk that was as good as what was there. It was replaced with something which I believe is a tripping hazard, not as good as what was there, was done to save money. And one more thing, we now have to extend our stone walkway 15 inches out towards the road. Now, I never removed any of the stones on my walkway, and Todd and his crew never removed any of the stones during the installation of the sidewalk. That street is narrower than it was. The sidewalk is narrower. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's harder to get around cars on Leffingwell. We lost like on-street parking, and everyone had to extend their lawn. Now, we just spent about $8,000 on our lawn over the last 5 years, bringing in sod and grass, and now we had to extend our yard out. So the town brought fill in to fill in that gap, and that fill contains not only invasive weeds, but I have glass and plastic and concrete in the fill that was used to backfill along the sidewalk in my front yard. So we're not happy about it, and I'm hoping that the town council can talk about it and have the sidewalk replaced, or at least investigate exactly what happened to find out what's going on. Number one, we don't need any ADA violations in our town, because that just costs the town money. We have to hire attorneys for those things, and we have limited funding as it is, so let's not do that. The smart thing would be go out, look at it, you know, and not Carl and not Todd, because I know where they stand. Somebody else, like a third-party independent review, maybe a couple of the other committee members who have no investment in this, somebody who wasn't involved in paying for it directly or figuring out who was going to do the work. I don't want that, because we're not confident that if Carl and Todd came back out and looked at it, anything would change. They've already been out. Todd actually admitted during the meeting, and you can ask Carl, he said, you know what? That is a tripping, he didn't say that's a tripping hazard, but because my truck was catching on the curb, Todd said he would come back out and shave off the high parts of the asphalt curb. Well, that was in, August, and that never happened. So, our goal would be to have the entire sidewalk on Leffingwell replaced with what was originally there, which is a concrete sidewalk and a 90-degree concrete curb. Get rid of the tripping hazards, make it look like a historic street. And that's all I have to say about that. As Forrest Gump said.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
We'll accept your comments, and then we'll just put this on an agenda item for the council to discuss at a
Thank you.
future meeting. Any other visitors want to be recognized? All right, hearing none, then we will move on to item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes from the December 1st, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Item number 4, which is appointments and reappointments. Tobias Adler, Conservation Commission student member. I guess he's been recommended to be appointed to this position. Do we have a motion to appoint Tobias Adler to the Conservation Commission student member?
I'll make that.
Comment?
Well, yeah, is that in the charter that we have student members now to the Conservation Commission? I don't remember seeing that. I know there are certain committees that by charter have students. I think we did address one about a week or so ago. But now, what is it? Every commission or committee is going to also get student members? We just can't make this stuff up. It has to be
Right.
in the charter.
I don't know.
So, I know if some commission sees, oh, geez, they got student members, you got to look at the charter. Some are in there by charter. And that's the only comment. I have nothing against students. It's
Well,
just
we
that
don't
we
know.
got to do
Right.
things right.
If we don't know definitely that they're allowed for a student member, then we should table it till the next meeting.
By ordinance, no. By charter, no. By their bylaws and their prior practice, yes. Historically, they have not.
So the past they've had one.
By their charter,
By their
by their bylaws.
bylaws.
Non-voting.
Yeah, I know they're not voting, and it's a nice thing to get students involved. I have nothing against that. I just want to make sure we're not starting a precedence where all of a sudden people just make up positions. If you're saying this is an established position is that, how should I say, compulsory then? If a commission makes up their own bylaws and adds that to a student?
I'm not sure why a commission would create its own bylaws when it's created by ordinance and by charter, but in this particular case, they created bylaws. Human Services Commission also has its own bylaws. I don't know who approved their bylaws previously, but maybe it went to the Board of Selectmen. I don't have the full history on that, but that's how they decided that they were going to organize themselves. The bylaws for Human Services, because they were updating it, I had them bring it in front of the council, so the council did have eyes on their bylaws and did approve those. So the process, maybe Christine knows since she was here a little bit longer.
Well, is that the process then we should approve the bylaws of these commissions that, as they come forward? And then we make the decision, the council.
Well, I think if they're gonna make changes, if they're requesting a change to their bylaws, then like we did with Human Services.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Human Services
Right.
did, yes, and we approved it.
Right.
So maybe, I'm just saying, table it, as you said, let them come forward with a request to change their bylaws.
Is it in their bylaws or not? It is in their bylaws?
I believe it is.
Right.
This has been in practice, this position's been in practice for as long as I can historically remember, but
Well, I really can't, but, not to be argumentary, but just because something was established, if it wasn't established right, we shouldn't keep rubber stamping. That's all I'm saying. We have a town form of government here, town council. We're trying to, one of the things that, the reason why the council where the manager was established was because of all these precedents through the years,
Okay, we can table it then.
conflicting with each other. We're trying to streamline and make the government streamlined, and
I'll make a
everybody
motion.
does it the same. So I'm not against it. I just like to, if we approve the bylaws of the Human Services, I would just ask the same thing. Have this committee, the Conservation Commission, which has been established forever, just say, well, we'd like to now have our bylaws include a student member, and we can approve that. I mean, that's just my thought, I just.
Motion to table.
Second? Second. Further discussion?
What would we accomplish by tabling it?
Bringing them forward to have them, if they would like to amend.
Just do it properly, Carrie, that's all. And we look at the whole bylaws, we read them and say,
Yeah.
yep, this is a nice set of new bylaws. I mean, this is just an easy thing. Student, harmless. But if you allow commissions or committees just to make up their bylaws and just go along down their merry way and we don't see them, they could put something in there that later we look at and say, how the heck did we get stuck with this? Well, we just let it slide by. No more slide bys. This is why we have this council. This council will oversee everything and make sure everything is by the books. And it's an easy thing to correct. Just have them come.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. The next is a simple change over on the Sustainability Committee from an alternate to a full seat until 6/30/2022, and I believe Justin Teague was the one that was removed.
Yes.
Right, so Justin Teague got a full seat, so he now has left the Sustainability Committee, so they're just moving Holly Ann Moriarty to the full seat. Motion to appoint Holly Moriarty to the Sustainability Committee from an alternate to a full seat until 6/30/2022.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
What is the sustainability?
Abstained?
Something we established last January.
All right, next on the agenda item would be the ad that we did, which would be the appointment of a blight hearing committee. At this point, I did speak to Tim Guerra, and Tim has agreed to come on the blight hearing committee. So at this point, we're looking at, I believe, Dave Adams, Tim Guerra, and Jane Scully Welch as the three members to form the blight hearing committee. Do we have a motion to appoint?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
Second.
Second.
Any other further discussion?
Yes.
Who was the third member?
Dave
Tim,
Adams,
Jane,
Tim
and who?
Guerra, and Jane Scully Welch.
Who was the first name you gave me?
Dave Adams?
Okay.
Oh, Dave Adams.
Yes. It seems that recently there was a real Facebook skirmish between Jane Scully Welch and someone who's definitely going to be discussed as far as blight goes, and that's Labadia. And I would worry, because he has sued us in the past about this, that if he saw you on the committee after seeing the comments he made, we'd be in trouble.
Can I say, well, I mean, Jane could certainly recuse herself from that discussion. The blight officer that is yet to be determined is the person who would be instituting blight violations. And the violation would carry some sort of a penalty phase. And if the person wanted to dispute the penalty, then they would come before the hearing committee. And they would determine whether to implement the penalty or not. And at that point, Jane could recuse herself from the discussion. Or we could appoint an alternate so that there would still be an odd number
Yeah, there'd
of
have to
people
be
there.
three. There would have to be three to vote.
Well, I mean,
But
I mean, I don't think at this point we can kind of, I mean, again, the process that's going to be in place, if there's a blight officer, if somebody would like to file a complaint against somebody in town, it's not directly going to the hearing committee. It obviously goes through the blight officer to see whether or not it is blight. At that point, normally a letter would go to that individual. So, I mean, it's just sort of the process that's in place to then, I mean, add an alternate to this committee, then we would have to change the ordinance again. So that would be, we'd be reopening it up again.
I speak
This-
only because of his history
I mean,
and obviously his feelings, and I just had to bring that up.
great, but I don't think we should be speaking about any specifics and any individuals at this meeting tonight, so. Christine?
I think I did say at the last meeting, I did have my concerns about unbiased viewpoints on that committee, and I do have concerns with the composite of the, that committee, as well as what Carrie's referencing, and I did reference last time about suits to the town.
But again, they're not, the hearing committee would not be the ultimate deciding, I mean, if an individual can sue the town regardless. So it isn't like that's preventable. So the issue of somebody that's been charged with blight being upset, I mean, if he's interested in suing the town, he's interested in suing the town. So there's nothing that anybody on our blight officers, the hearing committee, any of these people can do. So, I mean, again, this is what the town wanted. We wanted an ordinance as it related to blight. I think it is obviously something that's important to the town. But again, people are going to learn as we go through, just because you don't like what the neighbor's yard looks like doesn't make it blight. That's the problem. So the ordinance speaks specifically to what is and is not blight, and that's what a blight officer then would have to make that determination. So, again, I think we're, slowly going to have to work into this. But again, and there's issues, I mean, this is an appointed board, hearing committee that has no time frame. So again, if there's issues with this, we can reappoint to this hearing committee.
I just felt it was necessary
Yeah,
to state
no,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Are we satisfied that the definition of what we consider blight is thorough?
We approved it, it's in our
Okay.
ordinance.
Okay.
Anyone else? No other comments? Look for a motion to approve Dave Adams, Tim Guerra, and James Philly Welch.
We have a motion.
We have a motion already? Any in a second?
Yes.
Any other further discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. No. Carried. No, carried.
Oh.
Christine?
Okay.
No, I voted in favor.
You vote in favor? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, the mask and everything else. Okay, so
Yeah.
that passes. All right, thank you. Item number 5, which is the American Recovery Plan Act public hearing. We obviously had our workshop last Wednesday, and at that time, we determined that we would move forward and set a public hearing date. At this time, we talked about the week of January 10th, and I believe we can do a January 12th, or before our meeting on the 19th of January. So whatever anybody feels more comfortable with and doing, then those are the 2 dates. January 12th, which would be a Wednesday.
Yep, they're both Wednesdays.
Both Wednesdays. So 12th, public hearing separately, or the 19th, and do it before our regular monthly meeting.
I like the 12th.
12th?
And if it goes on, we don't have to worry about delaying our meeting.
Correct.
But it does mean another night of us being there. But that's.
We've done public hearings before our meetings, and we've never had issues. So,
I don't know if this one will be
right. You don't know.
well attended or not.
Anybody else have any opinions?
It's 3.8 million.
Nobody cares?
What time did we say? 7?
6?
7 or so?
Yeah, 6. So we'll do 6 on the 12th? Okay, you good with that?
Right?
Motion to do public hearing for the ARPA funding on January 12th,
I move it.
6
Second.
PM. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
6 p.m.
Abstained? Thank you. So 1:12 at 6 PM. Next, the Johnson & Johnson Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc. settlement agreement. This was actually discussed at our last meeting as well. So at this point, we have a suggested motion of the town council. The town of Clinton hereby authorizes and directs the town manager to execute the necessary form to participate in a proposed settlement agreement with Johnson & Johnson Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., Ortho McNeil Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and Janssen Pharmaceutica, Inc., collectively Janssen. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion just to get on the floor.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Well,
Are we the sole plaintiff?
No, this is what we discussed at the last meeting.
Oh,
It's a class action
That's a
lawsuit.
class,
it's
okay.
a class action.
Yeah.
I mean, no settlement has even been made yet or anything. They're just beginning the process, is that it, Carl?
For this particular creator of opioids, they've gotten to the point of a settlement.
Okay,
And so now they're asking people to join in the settlement agreement rather than continuing their litigation. We didn't have litigation.
Okay.
So every municipality in the state of Connecticut is being asked to participate in this
All right.
particular settlement.
okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Item number 7, which is the second amendment to the Tier 1 Long-Term Municipal Solid Waste Management Services Agreement. Again, this was discussed at our last meeting. So we're just moving forward with the suggested motion. The town council of the town of Clinton hereby authorizes and directs the town manager to execute a second amendment to Tier 1 Long-Term Municipal Solid Waste Management Services Agreement between the town of Clinton and the Materials Innovation and Recycling Authority, New York. Motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Item number 8, town facility rental fee policy. Again, this was discussed at our last meeting, that we were discussing the fee policy that we had in place, and now this is pen to paper on the policy. Everybody's received a copy of it. Anybody have any questions on it? This was discussed at the last meeting. Everybody good? So at this point, we'll just look for a motion to approve the town facility rental fee policy.
I'll make a motion.
Good.
Second.
Very good.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Line item transfer, this is, I believe, town clerk. So everybody has a copy of that in their booklet. It is the town clerk. So the addition of the 4 new ordinances, she's looking to increase general code by 800 and decrease elections by 800. Do we have a motion to approve the transfer of funds as submitted?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Finance Director's report. Sue is not here tonight, so we all do have a copy of the report. If anyone has any questions after the meeting, after they review it, you can just email Carl and he will get the answers for any of those questions anybody may have. All right. Council's discussion on future projects. Anyone?
Would this be an appropriate time to ask for the 3 of us who are new here to be filled in on, say, what's happened in the last year over Pearson, so we can catch up with what we should know
Sure.
regarding it as a future project?
Yep.
I guess I'd ask you, Carl.
Yeah, Carl can give us update. He's working, it's pretty much the same that it's been for 2 years, but he will let everybody know.
Previously, the council spent a lot of time discussing this in executive session.
Right.
So to give you a report on the fly right now, the property is encumbered by a deed restriction from the Morgan Trust that says that it has to be used for the public education or the moral good of the residents of Clinton. So that encumbers some of the property. It's actually 3 parcels of land makes up that property. The property slice in question is the one in the middle that sits in the sandwich of the properties. So the discussion previously was how to address the language that was in that deed restriction. The prior town attorney and I had conversations with folks from the Attorney General's office. There was a disagreement of opinion between the town attorney at the time and the AG's office on interpretation and hundreds of years of legal precedent in the town. When we changed town attorneys, the new town attorney got up to speed on the project. We had to go over the issues a second time with the AG's office staff because some people retired, so I had to bring them up to speed. And there were prior conversations that took place with the Morgan Trust trying to figure out the path forward to deal with the the deed restriction. I can tell you that much in public session. If you want more, we should go into executive session at some point in time to discuss that.
May I ask this question? Would the entire building have to be used for educational purposes? Or let's just say, if it were a community center and programs were offered, would that work?
It says public education or moral good, so it's dated language, but clearly moral good raises some doors that could be opened for how you could use the property differently and not have a problem with the deed restriction. So it's really kind of a question path-wise of, do you want to clean up the property and have sole ability to decide what you do, or do you want to navigate around this deed restriction and then have an ongoing conversation with the Morgan Trust folks on land use?
How close are we to getting to where we need to be on that conversation?
We'd need to talk in executive session on
Okay,
that.
okay.
The other thing that the council did do previously was the $12,000 fund that we put for structural integrity of the building, which ultimately will lead us down path possibly about what we can and can't do with the building. So that's one of the other things. That's the reason why we did that, because you need to make sure that we could, if there's items and things that we would like to do with the building, that's got to direct us on where we can and can't go.
It's nice to have a plan, because eventually something will be resolved. And, right.
But we can't have a plan until we know.
Right, but I
Structural
get planning
integrity
for a
building,
plan,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to bring up the project log. I know, I think it's in this section. But, so I talked to Carl over the last few days, and what he asked is that we have agreement as a council on what's in that log. So that exchange right there is a perfect example of why I think it would be helpful for Carl if we have this log and we just go through it and it's updated, and some of the things I understand are maybe a year-long project, so within 2 weeks there might not be anything. You just say no update, nothing new. And like I said, Carl had also asked somebody from here be sort of assigned to it as a liaison to help. And so, I wanted to see if we could at least take the next step to see if, the 5 or 6 things I put on there are what everyone agrees should be on there, which was ARPA spending, infrastructure spending. I put social spending that hasn't really happened yet, and I'm no expert in that area. Pearson School Project, senior services, which Carol had recommended, and wastewater project. So I tried not to get super creative there, a certain 5 or 6 items that are really of interest to the town that, when we talk about future projects, not getting too hypersensitive of the word, major things that are happening that we'd like updates on. So, I don't know, I'll put it out to the council to say, does that sound like a good list, or are there things you would want crossed off of that list, or things you want added to that list?
Were you the author of this list?
Yes.
I noticed the Indian River project.
Oh,
What were you thinking there?
just an update on what's happening, with the playground and what the buildings are, and, an update on what's happening with the project. Yeah, Dennis.
But that's up to the contractor. I mean, we have no control of that. I mean, one of us have to sit there and talk to the contractor every week and ask him what he's doing. It's really out of our hands. I
What's
mean,
going on with that anyway?
Well, I mean,
Well,
a
he's
town
building.
council project should be something that, as a council, we have
excuse
the
me.
authority and the ability to work on. Like Pearson for us is a council project.
Right.
Because that's a town-owned property, we have control over it, and we'll be making decisions on what we do with that. You have Indian River, which is
Chris,
a,
I apologize. I thought you were talking about the sports complex. That's called
No,
the
that's-
Indian River too.
oh, IROC, yeah. So he's talking,
No.
right.
You're talking about a private development.
Yeah.
Right, so anything, anything that's a private development is difficult for us to actually control, because again, he doesn't come to us with updates. The developer will contact Carl if there's issues with things, but other than that, we're waiting just like everybody else when he finds tenants and he'll come to the town when they have a tenant in place and a signed agreement as far as that goes. So, you know, the communications that we've had, and I think the council has had in the past, has always been to update once we know what's going on. You know, I think we've done a very good job putting out as far as Big Y when it was opening. We put something out, I think Carl, you know, had that post there about the park, or, you know, the recreation area over there, Big Y. So, I mean, again, once we have the information, we'll put that out to the public. But as far as the council, you know, what do we work on? Like, yeah, like what are the projects that we have control over, that we really can work on? I mean, that's, I think, what needs to be put on here.
Yeah, I think what the delineation there is sort of where I would draw the line is things that we can control and work on, which is what you're talking about, versus sort of what we would want Carl, maybe, and that's in Carl's report, what we would want Carl to report on, sort of the major things that are happening. So, you know, if we want to just put on this list items that we have control over as a project, then that's fine. You know, but the example that I was just, you know, with Carrie's interested in, say Carrie's question was more of, hey, and someone just said, what is happening over at, you know, Indian River, you know, with the project, and we asked Carl that, he might not be prepared for that question, and he might not know the answer, he might not have talked to the developer. So, you know, if there was a list, he would know, these are the things that, you know, we're gonna mention in certain order that we're gonna get a report on. So, I don't know, I guess we could split it out and say projects that we actually have control over. So that, what would that be? ARPA, infrastructure, social spending, Pearson, senior services.
I don't know if you could put that on there.
I mean, right, I mean, senior services as a project, that's somebody that we've hired that's gonna be dealing with, so I mean, that would come probably from that individual. If we would invite her and say, what are you working on? Can you give us an update on what you're working on? So again, you know,
Perhaps in that vein, it would be, a project would be more like a temporary senior center. That could be a project that we work on, because we've promised the seniors a center for a while, and now we have this new woman who's hired.
Mhm.
And perhaps in the future, we could talk about the idea of having a place.
I mean, we certainly can open that up.
That's an
for discussion.
idea for a project.
Right, I mean, that would be a project, but again, I think we have to stay on task where, I don't know who's promised that we're having a senior center. I don't know where that came from, sort of thing. There's been a discussion about senior centers, that there may be people that are interested in doing it, but, I mean, for us to sit here right now and say that we've promised a senior center, that, I don't.
Well, yeah, that was just, 2 years ago when several people ran for council. That was something that we talked, well, not we, because I didn't run, but that was something that, when I knocked on doors, people asked, you said a lot of things that you represent, but how do you feel about the senior center? I mean, they've been talking about a senior center. There has been a lot of talk about a senior center.
I'm not saying that there hasn't been talk about it, but I'm saying again, yes, if that would like to be a project, then we can talk about that as a project.
Okay.
Because again, the discussion was always, the project is, senior center is not as easy, because yes, it was discussed, and yes, there was some conversations and individuals that had it, and I guess I was the one that was guilty of saying, you need to kind of be fiscally responsible, easy for me to say, as it relates to a senior center. Because the thing is, well, we want a senior center. Great, let's discuss it. But then, there's also budgetary items that are related to that, and the cost to find one, there's a cost to maintain it, there's other costs that were, and that's the point that I was trying to make through all of that. And, so that's fine, if that the council itself is on agreement that they'd like to discuss that, to see if there's a place in town where we'd like to have
It's an
this
example.
temporary, yes.
An
that's
example of
fine.
a project, right.
Yeah.
The council previously had a committee that helped look at this issue, helped define the issue, helped give the council a report on creating the position, and also spoke to long-term growth toward the senior center. In that report, the committee also offered themselves to be appointed as a senior advisory committee that would be a standing committee to help the individual that is ultimately appointed. that second step didn't take place to appoint the person. And that report that was given to the council suggested that a physical building would be something to strive for, not something you'd have right out in the box. Build a program, build a following, build a building.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a temporary until that kind of thing.
And so
It's
this
build a
project log
program,
is,
so you've got a small amount of money in the budget that limits your ability to have a program, which means you're more likely going to be in this room than you're going to be in another separate building if you're going to run a program.
Which is also a possibility.
and I was just gonna say that the project log isn't supposed to be creating work. It's just an organizational tool to keep track, you know, so if we say, you know, I personally, when I've been just a person in the audience, I feel like it's willy-nilly all over, like, all right, let's talk about this for a little while, let's talk about that, and it gets confusing. Whereas if we have 5 things that, as a council, that we're really interested in projects, the log is just to say, hey, nothing's happened on it, or it's a long-term deal, we haven't done anything, and also have someone from the council assigned to it. It's not meant to really create more work, it's just meant to organize ourselves.
Myself, looking at that log, and there's 2 projects, Pearson and the ARPA right now, for the commission council to keep reporting on. Those are 2 projects that this council is actually involved with and overseeing. As far as I know right now, there isn't a water commission or a water pollution project on the books. As far as I know, water commission hasn't come to us and no one else has come to us to ask for money and move forward. So, you know what I'm trying to say, Chris? I like the log.
Yeah.
And I think it's good, and I think just after what you said before, that I agree, and that really the 2 projects that are really facing us right now is getting together that ARPA money, getting something done on Pearson, for sure.
Yeah, well,
And I don't know how to stand on that expenditures thing, because basically that's in the hands of Carl, because he establishes the capital expenditures for the year, where we're going forward on projects and stuff. So I mean, then presents it to the committee. I mean, certainly we could talk about it, but I don't know what you would consider that as being a project. That's going to be more or less like a budgetary situation, because we're going to get to it in the budgets. What are we going to put in the budget for capital expenditure and whatnot? But so it'll be addressed there, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if it has to be a separate issue on the log, but certainly I wouldn't be against it if it was there.
yeah, I mean, there doesn't have to be 6 things on the item.
No.
If there's ARPA spending, Pearson school project, I mean, that's what I'm asking the council right
Good.
now. Are there things we need to cross off and things we need to add? So if we cross off Indian River, and Carl puts that in, and if we don't feel like wastewater is even to the project stage yet, I mean, I know we've talked about it the last 2 meetings, in that it's a big dollar budget, so we could take that off. And, you know, infrastructure spending is gonna be something in the future that, I mean, we could put that as the lowest priority. If there's anything else, like the temporary senior center, you know, could be something that we talk about. I know Carol's had interest in it, and Carrie's talked about it, you know.
I think ultimately what you're talking about is our capital planning and then our operation budget for the next fiscal year. Your capital planning is going out 5 years. It really couldn't go out to 10 years because some of these projects are much longer, such as the wastewater pollution control committee projects. There's things such as the gentleman who talked about the sidewalks. We have, in the last fiscal year, we went out and got a survey of both roads and sidewalks, so you could take that in terms of planning strategy and move forward from which sidewalks and which streets are going to be completed, year 1, year 2, year 3. That helps us budget for those projects. I think ultimately it's probably best to take a look at what we have in cycle right now and then boil it down to what kind of conversations you want to have at the town council level on a bi-monthly basis. So if there's specific information you're looking for, like senior resources, that specific thing, Carl's administrative, what's the title, apologize?
A senior program coordinator.
Program coordinator can
Coordinator.
provide a report to Carl. Carl can report back to the council at that meeting. If that's the topic we want to make sure that we're covering, wastewater pollution control, we can always approach them and say, we'd like an update on which projects were under consent order by the state. Granted, that's something that's going to filter through Carl's office, not necessarily through WPCC, but those have to be coordinated. So I think ultimately it's what is the interest of this council for each individual meeting, and then looking at the long-term strategic planning and then a short-term operational planning.
As the handbook explained, our job as a council is to prioritize projects. So I think that that's something that we should take seriously. Right, Carl? Is that our role, to prioritize projects that we
The
want to
issue that I was
start?
looking for with my conversation with Chris was, if you want a log, it does make it easier to understand what you want to hear from on a regular basis, so that I'm giving you good information. It should reflect the consensus of the council. It should be prioritized what you want to hear about, and it should be tied back to the goals and objectives that the council approved, so that there's some, we're pushing us into some structure that has focus, instead of, it may look like it's all over the place, but it would be better to have things put into a framework that at least gives some structure. So I'm really just looking out of this for the log discussion is, what do you want to track? What do you want to follow? If we're talking about infrastructure spending and it means the federal money that came by way of stimulus, that's one kind of conversation that's separate and distinct from the annual budget cycle and the capital improvement plan. If social spending was sort of in that same vein, again, that's federal tracking of where those dollars are, when they're being released, who they're going to, what pots we have to check. Do we have projects that are shovel-ready or good to go for an application round? Those sorts of details might be things to discuss for, these are funding opportunities the town wants to pursue for a given project that we know exists in the pipeline.
So,
Pearson and ARPA spending, I think there's some clear consensus that those are these projects for ongoing discussion.
so that's 4 things on there: ARPA, infrastructure, social spending, Pearson, and
Social spending hasn't passed the House yet, so.
yeah, I mean, way down on the list, but and we don't have to put it on now, we can put it on later. And just leave it at that if you want. I mean, a few items that we report on. I think, from my conversations with Carl, and what I've always wanted is just, he needs direction from us on what we think is important. And this is the forum right now to add the things or take the things off the list that we want to talk about. Like I said, it's not meant to, it's just meant to be a tracking mechanism so we can bring it up, see whether there's been any progress, anything we need to talk about, and give us something to work on in between those 2 weeks.
I think that was, initially this was the issue that we had for the council, I think in the past as well, was making sure that we did talk about projects and talk about things that we wanted to do. That was the reason we had council discussion on future projects, is this mainstay on our agenda item. It's there every agenda, because that was one of the things that we needed to discuss going forward. The difficult part about all of that is what are those projects? Projects that we as a council have control over. Looking at a temporary senior center, can it be a discussion? Absolutely. That's to say, if that's the consensus of the council, that we would like to look into that to see if there's a place for it to go, how it would be, all the ins and outs of all that, then that's a project for the council. So wastewater, again, that's a completely different, item. So yes, so it can be a list that's, you know, a living document that we have a discussion about on these meetings, and if there's updates that we want as a council, then obviously we can, you know, it's easier for Carl to know where we're headed, you know, and directing him a certain way. So, you know, temporary senior center, if that's what we'd like to discuss as a future project or something that we'd like to discuss, then we'll have that discussion. So, you know, it's the consensus of the council on what we would like to work on. You know, and again, we're kind of limited in scope on what we can do here. You know, we own Pearson, so we have control over that. You know, so that's kind of always on our plate here. You know, the Indian River, and, you know, those are just basically updates, not necessarily a project, just an update. You know, where are we at with that? And that's, again, difficult because certainly don't want Carl sitting on the phone trying to track down a developer on an Indian River to find out what's going on, because, you know, there's other things that he should be doing. So
There's two other items that were put in front of the prior council that there was a desire for workshops to talk it through, but, you know, sort of ran out of time. So that is, there was a presentation to the prior council on relocating the fire department.
Right.
And so there's a lot there to unpack. There's, again, it's a longer term project. There's a lot of issues to navigate. A workshop would have been a forum to discuss that. The natural hazards mitigation study is another one where it was conducted at the regional level. The local annex was approved for stuff that's specific to Clinton, and then there was a desire to kind of get into some of that, some of the recommendations in there, start looking at projects that you could look at implementing, picking off, or trying to find a funding stream for that would start addressing that study. One of the conversation points was trying to get some interns involved to help with risk assessment. We're still waiting on UConn to make a determination on that. But those are two other big things that kind of still need to be on the radar screen for discussion. And sort of the initial conversation is having a workshop and at least hashing out the issues so the council is fully briefed on what all those things entail.
So that's a list of 5 items. ARPA, infrastructure, Pearson, temporary senior center, and relocating the fire department, and what was the last one?
Natural hazards mitigation.
Natural hazards mitigation.
I think what Chris is going for, and certainly something that I would really like to take part in, is rather than having it future projects, that all these become current projects, and we talk about them at each meeting.
But, I mean, some of these yes, you can do that, but ultimately, the fire department, that's like.
But still, talk about them at each meeting.
Right.
We're not gonna solve them.
Right, but if there's no update, there's no update. But yes, we can sit there and say no update.
Yeah, so
Because that's what it would be on most of them.
Yeah,
So
that's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, so I can update this list and send it to Mary?
That would be good.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, move on to item number 12, which is Chairman's report. Just one thing that I did have a conversation with Carrie, so I just want to remind everybody, especially the new council members, we have one general email box that's the town council, so there's no individual email addresses that are out there. So I just wanted to clarify, because I did have a conversation with Carrie. Every email that comes into the town council email box goes out. Mary sends them to all council members. If there are emails that go to the town manager's email box, which is different than the town council email box, correct? Of course. Right. There's emails that Carl gets that will not go to the council as if it's not needed to. If it's something that he will be handling on his end, that's not and will not be going to the council members. So any emails that come in directly to town council members will all be distributed to each council member. All right?
Just for clarification, we all do have individual email addresses, though,
You do,
apart from,
correct.
just so they understand.
Yeah, right. But again, the conversation I had is we try to limit the use of an individual council member email address so that individual council members aren't discussing or talking to anybody else without everybody else in the council knowing. Certainly wouldn't want an individual council member discussing something with somebody else in the public that other council members are not aware of. So that's why we kind of did it that way.
I did some research after being confused, and I noticed that in the towns, our neighbors are Board of Selectmen, and they have individual accounts. And then, interestingly enough, I went to towns with town managers, and they do it that way. And I think that that's interesting. But my question is, when do we discuss those?
Discuss what?
Those emails? And is somebody answering those emails? because I would certainly not want anyone to go unanswered. So is
Yes,
that's...
they're addressed, the emails are
They're-
addressed.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So when do we discuss emails such as some of the ones that came in this past week?
At council meetings.
Okay. Is there an item for that, for comments,
I mean,
where we do that?
do you have specific ones you want to talk about? I mean-
Well, I was just curious, because
Yeah.
we did get some, and we don't ignore them?
No,
Of course not. So we would discuss those here?
this would
Okay.
be the forum
All
to
right.
discuss it,
Okay.
yes, amongst council members, correct.
Okay, all right.
So is there anything that you, pressing that you want to discuss now, or?
I think that it would probably not be a bad idea to put that item here, so we do discuss the emails that come in, such as the one that discussed, something that I've discussed with you too, the couch on the property that a certain resident would like to see removed. Is that the sort of thing that just waits to go to blight?
Again, that's not kind of our thing. I mean, we can discuss the fact that somebody has a couch on their property, but that's really not something that the council deals with.
So
or
that's
we
great for
discuss.
us to know. So that's not a council thing?
Well, I mean,
That's
land
gonna go
use would be,
somewhere else.
if there's issues with somebody because they consider it to be blight, then we have a process that's in place. There's a couch that's on 81 right now, that's just sitting on the middle of 81. So, I mean, how far are we gonna take this?
My
You know-
question, will somebody respond to the email?
Yes, the
Okay,
emails
great.
with a response.
Great.
correct.
I'm just curious.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
mean, the blight issues are handled by blight now. So there's a process that we have in place, and so, I mean, it's not the council to sit here and discuss that stuff. I mean, if there's, pressing issues that the council should be discussing, that we feel that something should be changed, then maybe we discuss that. But every department in this building has a job. So, that responsibility of blight, since that seems to be the big topic, land use, Carl is the blight officer, the CEO, they would be handling those. So that process would be pushed to them. That's not in front of us to determine what it is or is not blight.
Okay.
So if people have complaints about anything, then now they know the process of how they have to go through it.
Yeah, I'm new here, so.
No, I understand. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I don't, yeah, but it is comforting to know that the emails are responded to. And let us know in a meeting which ones we should talk about.
Emails, any council member can discuss on any email when we get, that we get at any meeting. So, I mean, certainly can be discussed under council discussions, and it says future projects, but council discussions on anything. So if there's something that wants to be brought up on, an email that we receive, we certainly can discuss it. All right, anything else? We good? Then we move on to the town manager's report.
First and foremost, something that's not in the written report I gave you is the need to reappoint the open burning official. Up until this point, the individual serving as the open burning official was Edward Alvarino. He has a term that's determined by the state of Connecticut. His term expires at the end of January 2022. In order to be considered for reappointment, he has to take a specific test where the state is determining what those questions are. He has taken that test. He received a passing score under the program. The next step would be for the chief executive officer of the town to put his name forward for designation and the approval of DEEP as the open burning official. I just wanted to make sure the council was on board with that. If someone else is going to be considered, they have to take the test, they have to get a passing score, and then you'd have to deauthorize Mr. Alvarino in order to put someone else in that slot. So if there's no opposition, I'll continue to move the paperwork along to DEEP to keep him as the open burning official.
Do you want a motion to do so?
I'd like that, that'd be helpful.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you.
In the written report, bonding, in preparation for bonding in the early part of 2022 is ongoing. We're preparing materials that will be reviewed by Standard & Poor's. We have a rating call to affirm the rating on our debt, which will take place later this week in order to help keep moving us forward. So there's a fair amount of work that Sue is doing. work that I'm doing and coordination with our financial advisor in order to make sure that we are positions to keep this moving along. We traditionally issue debt in February. We're contemplating accelerating that schedule if market conditions warrant taking a different tack in the start of 2022. So the emphasis now is getting all the work in position and getting ready to go forward. The other item I included under our report under the COG was the regional housing study, which will now move into a phase that will become the local affordable housing plans. By state statute, every municipality is mandated to have a local affordable housing plan. We're delivering ours through this COG process. They're going to move into local discussions between January and March for what it's going to look like for how Clinton's plan will look. So much like the natural hazards mitigation study, I was looking to reach into a couple boards and commissions to identify individuals that would be interested in providing assistance to that process. Planning and zoning would make sense, EDC would make sense. If there's council people that are interested in a conversation about what affordable housing would look like in Clinton, you can let me know. If you're going to have some additional free time between January and March for that discussion. Beyond that, we've got an executive session item later on the agenda that will take a certain amount of time.
Any questions for Carl? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to item 14, Town Council Committee Liaison Reports. Does anyone have anything to report?
Well, I missed my first EDC meeting.
Great job, Tom.
I was there at the police station, ready to go, and it was a virtual meeting.
I can read my notes here. I wrote them, I printed them, but I dropped everything. So for Board of Ed, Marco presented to the EDC last night about, this is from Mary Ann, our new advanced manufacturing partnership with Goodwin College. The Building and Grounds Subcommittee reviewed the recommendations from an HVAC study for Joel and Elliott that was recently conducted. This relates to the use of ARP ESSER grant money to improve ventilation in the HVAC system to those schools. The board will be making decisions regarding next steps and how to apply the funding based on the recommendations. Several of you asked me about the new personnel subcommittee, so I asked her for a report on that. The personnel subcommittee met for the first time on Monday. Much of the discussion was focused on the charge of the subcommittee, what boards of education are able to do in terms of personnel, what information we have on personnel presently, and how this subcommittee contributes to the operation of the district. Conversation was also directed at the important work ahead of the board and the district in the development of both the budget and the strategic plan. Both of these guiding elements are closely involved with our staff, and we are considering ways to incorporate staff voice with fidelity and respect into these processes. Budget development is that's the end of that report. Budget development is well underway, and Board of Ed department budget submissions and review meetings are occurring in the month of December, and the Board of Ed workshops are scheduled for January.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Mr. D.
I have planning and zoning.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Karen.
There were two public hearings, both of them were closed and approved. One is the hammocks. They closed Osprey Commons from Waterside to through traffic. And the other was High Street, 92 High Street. There's going to be a dual family dwelling built there. Other things in which Market is soon going to have a deli. The two reports from John Gaskowski, he spoke about what was going on with Indian River. updates on that, and then he spoke to what Carl just spoke about, the regional housing plan. He also mentioned something that I found interesting, discussions with developers on potential projects on East Main Street, West Main Street, and potential cottage neighborhoods. That's something that he, speaking to Carl about, it sounded fascinating. I'd love to know more about that. And then Kathy King's report, there's an aquifer protection concern around hydrants, it would seem, and a lot of talk has been had this past month on flooding. There were programs that she attended for a few days, and concerns on that. And that was it. Well, it wasn't it, but that was part of it.
Thanks, Gary. Dennis?
Yeah, Police Commission, 2 nights ago, Monday. As far as their budget's concerned, they're riding along as expected, even though they had quite a, some sicknesses there in the dispatch, but they still think that they're right on budget. There's no problems there. Their overtime savings has been very good, which is nice to hear. They're under in both budgets at this particular moment, dispatch and police. That presentation I told you was gonna happen Monday about the dog, the comfort dog, that was delayed because of the fact we went virtual Monday. And they'll plan on doing it sometime in the month of January. When that happens, I'll give notice. And the final thing, and this goes right along with your log, the police said last night, Chief, that they are moving along on that radio system to upgrade the radio systems, which will encompass our fire, our police, and our DPW. And they're getting ready to get that package together and bring it to Mr. Kilduff and the council, and it's gonna be a shocker. That'll be one for your log. And the price tag is somewhere around $3.9 million. So certainly that will be on that log to start looking forward in the future, Chris. But they're in the stages, and they'll be bringing that forward to us. And that's my report.
Thank you, Dennis. Anyone else?
I just have one question, if we can have a follow-up from the Police Commission on the future of the drug recognition experts and the cost to the municipality for that, should we need to create different tiers within the police department. So I don't know if that's a question through Carl to the chief as well.
Okay, anything else? All right, this time we'll move on to item number 15, which is executive session, and invite Carl and Mary. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, we are back from executive session. We'll move on to item number 16, which is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you again,
Well, I gotta say
everyone.
one thing, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
I don't think we meet before Christmas again.
We do not.
So Merry Christmas all to the entire council.
Christmas.
I think even Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah.
We don't meet until after the new year. So Happy New Year's also.
See you next year.
Same, yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.